There is a building at the bottom of the ocean. It looks like a lobster trap. And if you have ever seen an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, you already know exactly which building I am talking about. You have seen it 1,000 times, maybe 10,000. It sits there on the sandy floor of Bikini Bottom, tucked between a row of nothing and a restaurant that has never once had a willing customer. And it has a sign out front shaped like a clam. 5 little maritime signal flags flutter above the door. The tables inside are made from ship steering wheels. The chairs are barrels. And behind the counter, behind that little order window shaped like the bow of a boat, there is a grill. And on that grill, there is a patty. And that patty has been cooking for over 25 years now. The Krusty Krab. You know it. You grew up with it. You have probably seen more of the inside of that fictional restaurant than you have of some actual restaurants you have eaten at in real life. And here's the thing that got me. The thing that made me want to make this video. I was rewatching early SpongeBob the other night, just putting it on in the background the way a lot of us do. And I started paying attention to the Krusty Krab itself. Not SpongeBob. Not Squidward. Not Mr. Krabs counting his money. The building. The restaurant. The thing that ties almost every single episode of this show together. And I realized I had never actually sat down and thought about how deep the lore of this place goes. How many contradictions are buried in its history? How many real-world inspirations Steven Hillenberg wove into every detail of its design? How many episodes hinge entirely on the dynamics that happen inside those walls? And how those dynamics tell you everything you need to know about what this show is really about. So tonight, that is exactly what we are doing. We are going through all of it. The hidden history of the Krusty Krab. Every origin story. Every contradiction. Every time the show revealed something about this restaurant that changes how you see everything else. The lore that is sitting right there in plain sight that most people have never actually pieced together. And I think by the end of this, you are going to look at that little lobster trap building completely differently. So if you are watching this late at night, get comfortable, grab a blanket, maybe get a snack, preferably not a Krabby Patty, because we are going to have some complicated feelings about those by the time we are done. And if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these for you. We are going to be here for a while. Okay, so let us start with something most people do not think about. The first time you ever saw the Krusty Krab. May 1st, 1999. That is the date. The pilot episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, called Help Wanted, aired on Nickelodeon right after the 1999 Kids' Choice Awards. And the very first real plot of this entire series, the very first story SpongeBob SquarePants ever told, is about a sponge trying to get a job at a fast food restaurant. Think about that. Out of all the stories Steven Hillenberg could have chosen to introduce his show, all the underwater adventures, all the possibilities of an ocean full of talking sea creatures, he chose this. A job interview. SpongeBob wakes up. He is nervous. He is excited. He walks up to the Krusty Krab, and there is a help wanted sign in the window. Squidward and Mr. Krabs are inside, and they do not want to hire him. Squidward thinks he is annoying. Mr. Krabs thinks he is too small, too scrawny, too eager. So Mr. Krabs sends him on an impossible errand. Tells him to go find a hydrodynamic spatula with port and starboard attachments and turbo drive. It is supposed to be a joke. It is supposed to get rid of him. But while SpongeBob is gone, the Krusty Krab gets swarmed. 5 buses full of anchovies descend on the restaurant, demanding Krabby Patties, and Mr. Krabs and Squidward cannot handle it. SpongeBob comes back, spatula in hand, because the bargain mart only had one in stock, flies into the kitchen, and feeds every single anchovy in a sequence so absurdly energetic that it set the tone for the entire series. And here is what gets me about that pilot. SpongeBob does not save the day through cleverness or magic or some wild adventure. He saves the day by being really, really good at his job. He is a fry cook. That is his superpower. And the Krusty Krab is not just a setting in this episode. It is the thing SpongeBob wants more than anything in the world. It is his dream. And Hillenberg made that choice deliberately. See, Steven Hillenberg was not just an animator. Before he ever went to CalArts to study experimental animation, before he ever pitched SpongeBob to Nickelodeon, he was a marine science educator at the Ocean Institute in Dana Point, California. He had a bachelor's degree in natural resource planning with an emphasis on marine resources from Humboldt State University. He taught kids about tide pools and sea life. But before all of that, when he was younger, right out of high school, He worked summers as a fry cook and lobster boiler at a seafood restaurant, and that job stuck with him. When he created SpongeBob, he gave his main character the same job he once had. When he created Mr. Krabs, he based the character on his former manager at that restaurant, who Hillenberg described as a red-headed, muscular former army cook. Those 3 traits got adapted directly into Krabs. The red color standing in for the hair, the stocky build, the military background. This is not just a cartoon restaurant. This is a real place, filtered through Hillenberg's memory, and then dropped to the bottom of the ocean. And the building itself. You know that the Krusty Krab looks like a lobster trap, right? That is the design. It is based specifically on a New England-style lobster trap. Hillenberg knew exactly what he was doing with that. A lobster trap. And the owner is a crab. There is something darkly funny about that, if you think about it long enough. A crustacean running a business out of a trap designed to catch crustaceans. The whole restaurant is built on a kind of irony that Hillenberg loved. This tension between the surface-level silliness and something a little more unsettling underneath. And here is a detail I did not know until I went looking for it. When Hillenberg first designed Mr. Krabs, the character's surname was spelled C-R-A-B-S, Krabs, and the restaurant was called the Krusty Krab, with a C. He changed the spelling to K right before they started production on the pilot. His reasoning? He thought Ks were funnier. That is it. The Ks were funnier and more memorable. And honestly, he was right. Krusty Krab just hits different than Krusty Krab. It has a visual rhythm to it. The double K. It looks better on a sign. It sounds better when Mr. Krabs says it. That is the kind of tiny decision that separates a good show from a great one. And Hillenberg was making those calls before a single frame of animation was finished. So the Krusty Krab enters our lives as a dream. SpongeBob's dream. And from the very first episode, the show establishes this place as something more than just a fast food joint. It is where SpongeBob feels most alive. It is where he belongs. It is where he matters. And the show never lets you forget that. In Season 1, Episode 12B, Employee of the Month, which aired on March 8th, 2000, we find out that SpongeBob has won the Employee of the Month award at least 26 consecutive times, 26 months in a row. That means by the time we see this episode, SpongeBob has been the best employee at the Krusty Krab for over 2 years straight. No one else has even come close. And the episode is about what happens when Squidward, of all people, decides to compete for it. Not because Squidward cares about the award, because SpongeBob cares so much that it becomes a weapon. I keep coming back to that dynamic because I think it is the key to understanding everything the Krusty Krab represents in this show. SpongeBob loves his job. Genuinely, unconditionally. He finds meaning and joy in flipping patties. And the show never once suggests that he is wrong for feeling that way. But the show also never lets you forget what surrounds that joy. A boss who would sell him to the Flying Dutchman for 62 cents. A coworker who hates every second of being there. Customers who could not care less about the person making their food. And a building that is, quite literally, a trap. Now, let us talk about what is inside that trap. The Krabby Patty. Because you cannot talk about the Krusty Krab without talking about its signature product. And you cannot talk about the Krabby Patty without talking about the single longest running mystery in the history of this show. The secret formula. The secret formula first comes up in the episode Plankton, which is Season 1, Episode 3B, and it aired on July 31st, 1999. That is the episode that introduces Sheldon J. Plankton, the tiny copepod who runs the chum bucket across the street. And from that very first appearance, the show establishes the central tension. Plankton wants the formula. Mr. Krabs will do anything to protect it, and SpongeBob is caught in the middle. This innocent fry cook who loves both his job and, on some level, the little green guy who keeps trying to steal from it. Here is what I find so fascinating about the secret formula as a piece of storytelling. The show has been running for over 25 years. Plankton has tried to steal that formula in more episodes than I can count, and we still do not know what is in it. We know some things. In the Season 7 episode, The Great Patty Caper, they confirm a few ingredients: flour, barnacle shavings, and turmeric. In the episode Born Again Krabs, the Krabby Patty itself is described in its standard form with a top bun with sesame seeds, sea cheese, sea lettuce, sea tomatoes, pickles, ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, and onions. But the actual secret? The thing that makes a Krabby Patty, nobody knows. The formula is also a literal physical object in the show. It is kept in a safe. Sometimes it is kept in a bottle. Sometimes it is kept in Mr. Krabs' office behind his desk. The location changes depending on the episode, which is another one of those continuity contradictions that the show simply does not care about. But the physicality of the formula matters. It is not just information. It is an artifact, something you can hold and steal and lock away, and the elaborate lengths that Mr. Krabs goes to in order to protect it. The booby traps, the security protocols, the paranoid inspections, all of that reinforces the idea that this recipe is not just a business asset. It is a relic, a holy object, the thing that gives the Krusty Krab its power. And there is an episode that explores the formula's power in a way that I think is genuinely disturbing. Imitation Krabs introduces the idea that Plankton will literally impersonate another person to get the formula. He builds a robot. He wears a disguise until he commits identity fraud. The formula drives characters to madness, to deception, to betrayal. Mr. Krabs is paranoid because he knows what people will do for it. And he is right to be paranoid because in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, Plankton finally succeeds. He gets the formula. He takes over Bikini Bottom. He turns everyone into mind-controlled slaves. And the show shows you what a world without the Krusty Krab's independence looks like. It looks like a dystopia. One guy with all the power and everyone else under his boot. The formula is not just a recipe. It is a metaphor for the one thing a small business has that a monopoly cannot replicate. The genuine article. The real thing. And when that gets taken away, everything falls apart. And the show plays with this in such a clever way. In the episode Krabby Road from season 6, there is a shot of the formula, and the ingredients are written in complete gibberish, just random letters. Storyboard artist Vincent Waller confirmed on social media that this was deliberate, that the ingredients were listed as nonsense on purpose, so the audience would never know the real recipe. He also said something else that I think is significant. He said there is no meat in a Krabby Patty. None. Which, when you think about the fact that this restaurant exists in an ocean full of living sea creatures, makes a certain kind of disturbing sense. What would the meat be? Whose meat? The show never wants you to go there, but it leaves the door just slightly open for you to think about it if you are the kind of person who thinks about things at 2 a.m, which, if you're watching this, you probably are. But the real genius of the formula mystery, and I think this is something people overlook, is that it was never supposed to be solved. The secret formula is not a puzzle. It is a MacGuffin. It exists to create conflict, to give Plankton a reason to scheme, to give Mr. Krabs something to be paranoid about, and to give the audience something to wonder about. The moment you reveal what is in the formula, you kill the mystery. And the mystery is the whole point. And that brings us to the origin story. Or I should say, the origin stories. Plural. Because one of the strangest pieces of Krusty Krab lore is that the show has given us 3 different versions of how this restaurant came to exist, and none of them fully agree with each other. The first origin comes from the Krusty Krab training video. Season 3, Episode 10B, which aired on May 10th, 2002. And honestly, this might be one of the most brilliant episodes of SpongeBob ever made. The entire episode is structured as a corporate training video for new Krusty Krab employees. It has a narrator. It has cheesy graphics. It has acronyms. It is a perfect parody of the kind of mind-numbing orientation video anyone who has ever worked a service job has been forced to watch. And inside that parody, it tells us the history of the restaurant. According to this version, the Krusty Krab building used to be a retirement home called the Rusty Krab. Mr. Krabs, after serving in the Navy, fell into a deep depression. He was broke. He was lost. And then he found this bankrupt retirement home, bought it, added a K to the front, and turned it into a restaurant. That is it. That is the origin. A depressed war veteran buys a failing retirement home and turns it into a burger joint. And the show presents this with the same peppy corporate narrator voice that is telling you the POOP acronym stands for People Order Our Patties. There is something so perfectly SpongeBob about burying one of the saddest backstories in the entire show inside a training video that ends with the narrator about to reveal the secret formula and then cutting to the end credits. They never tell you. The episode just stops. I have rewatched that ending probably 6 times, and it hits different every time. because it is the show winking at you, telling you that the answer does not matter. The joke is that you wanted it. The second origin comes from Friend or Foe. Season 5, Episode 1. It aired on April 13th, 2007. And this one goes deeper. It tells us about the childhood friendship between Eugene Krabs and Sheldon Plankton. They were born on the same day, grew up together, were both bullied by the other kids. Plankton for being a genius, and Krabs for being poor. They were best friends, and one day, after being humiliated by the owner of a burger joint called Stinky's, they decided to go into the fast food business together. They worked on a recipe, a burger recipe, but they argued over it, fought about it, and in the process, the recipe got torn in half. Krabs got one piece, Plankton got the other. Krabs discovered something, some ingredient, and went off to start the Krusty Krab. Plankton went off to start the Chum Bucket, and they have been enemies ever since. Now here's what I want you to notice. This version does not mention the retirement home. It does not mention the Navy. It does not mention the Rusty Krab. It contradicts the training video origin in almost every way. And the show just does not address that. It gives you both versions and lets them coexist. And I actually love that about SpongeBob, because the show was never interested in building a perfectly consistent canon. It was interested in telling the best possible story for each individual episode. If the Krusty Krab needs to have been a retirement home for the training video to work, then that is what it was. If it needs to have been born from a broken friendship for Friend or Foe to hit, then that is what it is. The lore serves the story, not the other way around. The third origin, and this is the most recent one, comes from the SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run, the 2020 film, and the prequel series Camp Coral. In this version, the Krusty Krab's origin is somehow tied to SpongeBob himself, with the suggestion that SpongeBob gave Mr. Krabs the idea for the restaurant when they were both at Camp Coral. And look, I know a lot of fans have complicated feelings about this one. Sponge on the Run and Camp Coral were made after Steven Hillenberg passed away. He died on November 26th, 2018, at age 57, from ALS. He had disclosed his diagnosis to Variety magazine in March of 2017, and one of the things he had been clear about during his lifetime was his opposition to certain spin-off concepts. So the camp origin story exists in this space where the show is continuing without its creator, and the lore is being expanded in ways that Hillenberg may or may not have approved of. I am not going to tell you how to feel about that. I have my own thoughts, and we might get there. But I think it is worth acknowledging that the Krusty Krab now has 3 origin stories, and the messiness of that is itself a kind of lore. It tells you something about how this show evolved, how Nickelodeon's relationship with the property changed, and how the creative vision shifted over 25 plus years. Before we move on, I want to sit with the contradictions for a minute, because I went down a rabbit hole on this and I need to tell you what I found. The 3 origin stories do not just contradict each other on the facts, they contradict each other on the meaning. The training video version says the Krusty Krab was born from depression and desperation, a broken man finding a reason to get up in the morning. The Friend or Foe version says it was born from betrayal, a friendship that shattered, and the pieces became 2 competing restaurants. And the Camp Coral version says it was born from innocence, a kid at summer camp who gave an old crab an idea. Depression, betrayal, innocence. 3 completely different emotional engines driving the same origin. And the fact that the show never reconciles them is, I think, one of the most honest things about it. Because real places have messy histories. Real businesses were started for reasons that even the people who started them cannot fully articulate. Why did you open the restaurant, Mr. Krabs? Was it because you were sad? Because your best friend left? Because a sponge kid said something that stuck with you? Maybe all 3, maybe none. Maybe the real answer is that there is no single origin, just layers. And speaking of layers, let me tell you about what I think is one of the most underrated Krusty Krab episodes in the entire series. Squeaky Boots, Season 1, Episode 8B, aired September 17th, 1999. And this one is wild because it is a direct parody of Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart in a Nickelodeon cartoon for children in 1999. Here's the setup. Mr. Krabs buys a pair of cheap fishing boots for his daughter Pearl's birthday. Pearl hates them, obviously. She wanted actual nice boots, not bargain bin nonsense. So Krabs, who refuses to waste anything he has spent money on, decides to sell the boots to SpongeBob. He tells SpongeBob They are special fry cook boots, worn by the best of the best. SpongeBob, who would believe Mr. Krabs if Krabs told him the moon was made of Krabby Patties, is thrilled. He trades his entire paycheck for the boots and starts wearing them everywhere. To work, to the bathroom, to bed. And the boots squeak. Every step, every movement. An endless, maddening squeak that follows SpongeBob wherever he goes. At first, only Squidward notices. He goes on vacation to escape the sound. But then Mr. Krabs starts hearing it. He cannot stop hearing it. It follows him home. It invades his sleep. He steals the boots from SpongeBob in the dead of night and buries them under the Krusty Krab floorboards. And then, like the narrator in Poe's story, the sound of his crime begins to haunt him. He hears squeaking everywhere, in the frying, in the floorboards, in his own heartbeat. And finally, in front of his employees and customers, he breaks. He tears up the floor. He pulls out the boots. He confesses. And then, in one of the most unhinged moments in Season 1, he shrinks the boots and eats them, swallows them whole. And the episode ends with him on vacation with Pearl, hiccuping, and every hiccup makes the boots squeak from inside his stomach. Look, I love this episode. I love it because it takes one of the most famous horror stories in American literature and transplants it into the Krusty Krab. And it works. It works because Mr. Krabs' guilt is real. He scammed SpongeBob. He sold him worthless boots for the price of an entire paycheck. And the squeaking is not just annoying. It is the sound of his conscience. It is the telltale heart, beating under the floorboards, reminding him of what he did. And the fact that his solution is to eat the evidence is so perfectly Mr. Krabs that it circles back around from absurd to psychologically accurate. He does not want to face what he did. He wants to consume it. Literally swallow his guilt. And it does not work. The squeaking continues from inside him. This is the kind of thing SpongeBob does that no other show could pull off. It takes the Krusty Krab, this goofy fast food restaurant, and turns it into the setting for a Poe adaptation. And it does it in 11 minutes. In Season 1. Before the show even fully knew what it was yet. Now, the Krusty Krab is also the stage for some of the show's most interesting explorations of what it means to want something you cannot have. And I want to talk about an episode that I think gets overlooked in Krusty Krab discussions. The Algae's Always Greener, Season 3, Episode 1A. In this one, Plankton finally gets what he wants. Not through scheming, through magic. He uses a device to switch lives with Mr. Krabs. And suddenly, Plankton is the owner of the Krusty Krab. He has the formula. He has the restaurant. He has SpongeBob as his loyal fry cook. He has everything he has been chasing for years, and he hates it. He absolutely hates it. Because running the Krusty Krab is not the fantasy Plankton imagined. SpongeBob is overwhelming. The customers are demanding. There is an alternate universe version of Mr. Krabs, who is now the one trying to steal the formula, completely unclothed and crazed, storming the restaurant the way Plankton used to. And Plankton realizes that the life he envied, the life on the other side of the street, is just as chaotic and exhausting as his own. Maybe more so. He goes back to his original life voluntarily. He chooses the chum bucket. He chooses failure. And I think that episode quietly destroys the idea that the Krusty Krab is a prize to be won. It is not. It is a burden. It is a responsibility. It is an endless grind of managing employees and serving customers and protecting a formula and dealing with crises. Plankton spent years fantasizing about owning it, and when he got it, he could not last a single day. The grass is not greener. The algae is not greener. The Krusty Krab is not freedom. It is just a different kind of trap. And only someone like Mr. Krabs, someone who has built his entire identity around the grind, can survive inside it. Okay, so we have talked about how the Krusty Krab was born. Now let us talk about what it is like to work there. Because I think the show is doing something much more sophisticated than most people give it credit for when it comes to depicting the Krusty Krab as a workplace. And this is where the hidden lore gets really interesting. Let me start with Squidward. Squidward Tentacles, the cashier, the guy who hates his job more than anyone in the history of fictional employment. And I mean that. I have watched a lot of television. I have seen a lot of characters who hate their jobs, but Squidward's misery at the Krusty Krab is something else. It is so specific, so layered, so real, that entire generations of people did not fully understand it until they grew up and got their own terrible jobs. Here's the thing about Squidward. He is not just grumpy. He is an artist trapped in the body of a fast food cashier. He wants to play the clarinet. He wants to paint. He wants recognition and beauty and a life that means something beyond taking orders from people who do not tip. And every single day, he goes to work at the Krusty Krab, stands behind that register, and watches SpongeBob find pure, uncut joy in the exact same environment that is slowly killing Squidward's soul. That contrast is doing so much thematic work that I think a lot of people miss. SpongeBob and Squidward are both trapped in the same building, doing the same tedious jobs, working for the same greedy boss. But SpongeBob loves it, and Squidward hates it. And the show is asking you, sometimes gently and sometimes not gently at all, which one of them is right. The episode Squid on Strike, Season 2, Episode 20A, which aired on October 12th, 2001, makes this tension explicit. Mr. Krabs starts charging his employees for everything: talking, breathing, existing. He literally charges them a fee for the act of existing in his restaurant. And Squidward decides to organize a strike. He makes picket signs. He tries to get SpongeBob on board. And SpongeBob, bless him, does not understand what a strike is. He does not understand the concept of labor resistance because he cannot fathom the idea that working at the Krusty Krab could be bad. When SpongeBob finally agrees to strike, he does it with the same enthusiasm he brings to everything else. He destroys the Krusty Krab in the process, thinking that is what striking means. And the ending of that episode is devastating in a way the show plays completely straight. Mr. Krabs sentences SpongeBob and Squidward to work at the Krusty Krab forever. And the final image is their skeletons, still behind the counter, still working. The show cuts away before it lingers. But think about what it just showed you. 2 employees worked to death by their boss in a Nickelodeon cartoon. That aired in 2001. I actually have a theory about the Krusty Krab that I have never heard anyone else bring up. I think the show intentionally uses the restaurant as a stage for exploring something that most cartoons, especially kids' cartoons, never touch. The mundanity and the exploitation of work, not the heroics, not the drama. The day-to-day grind of showing up, doing your job, dealing with terrible customers, and going home to do it all again tomorrow. SpongeBob SquarePants is, at its core, a show about a fry cook. And every single layer of lore the show builds around the Krusty Krab reinforces that. This is not a place of adventure. It is a place of work. And the show is fascinated by what work does to people. Look at Mr. Krabs, Eugene Harold Krabs, voiced by Clancy Brown, who improvised the voice during his audition. Apparently, Hillenberg kept telling Brown to chuckle faster and faster until he formed the signature Mr. Krabs laugh. And that voice, that laugh, has been carrying one of the most complex characters in animated television for over 2 decades. Because Mr. Krabs is not just a greedy boss. He is a commentary on something. His full backstory, as the show builds it over multiple seasons, is tragic. He served in the Navy. He earned the nickname Armor Abs Krabs. He was the chief janitor on the SS Gourmet. He was what he calls the head chef on a ship with a very unfortunate name, which is the show's way of saying he cleaned the bathrooms. He came back from service, broken, depressed, and poor. He fell into what the training video describes as a deep depression that seemed endless. And out of that depression, he built the Krusty Krab. But the wealth he found did not heal him. It addicted him, Mr. Krabs' obsession with money is not a personality trait. It is a trauma response. He came from nothing. He nearly had nothing, and now he will do anything, to never feel that emptiness again. The show shows you this. It shows you the depression. It shows you the military service. It shows you the poverty. And then it shows you the cheapness, the exploitation, the refusal to spend a single cent he does not have to. And it is not really that funny anymore. It is still funny. SpongeBob makes everything funny. But underneath the humor, there is a character study of a man who was broken by the world and responded by trying to own a piece of it. And the Krusty Krab is that piece. It is not just a restaurant to Mr. Krabs. It is his identity, his safety net, his proof that he matters. I want to talk about Clancy Brown for a second, the man behind the voice. because I think understanding Brown helps you understand Mr. Krabs. Brown auditioned for the role in the late 90s, before the show existed as anything more than a weird little cartoon Nickelodeon was putting together. He went in and, by his own account, just did a piratey voice. That is how he described it in interviews. A piratey voice. And Hillenberg said, "You are the guy." That's simple. But there is more to it than that. Hillenberg kept telling Brown to chuckle faster and faster during the session until the Mr. Krabs laugh formed organically. That signature laugh, that wheeze cackle hybrid that sounds like greed given a voice, was not written. It was discovered through collaboration, through play, through two creative people in a recording booth finding something together. And Brown has been doing that laugh for over 25 years now. He has said in interviews that his favorite line in the entire show comes from the episode My Pretty Seahorse, when Mr. Krabs says to SpongeBob, "You are a mystery, SpongeBob." And I love that that is his favorite. Not a big dramatic moment. Not a joke. Just a quiet observation from an old crab to a young sponge, acknowledging that after all these years, he still does not fully understand the kid who works for him. There is warmth in that. Real warmth. And Brown puts it in the voice every time. And then there is Tom Kenny, SpongeBob's voice. The man who has won 2 Daytime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Performer in an Animated Program in 2018 and 2020. Kenny and Bill Fagerbakke, who voices Patrick, hosted the 2024 Kids' Choice Awards as SpongeBob and Patrick, the first time animated characters hosted the ceremony. They also did live commentary during the 2024 Super Bowl broadcast on Nickelodeon, improvising jokes in real time using motion capture. Kenny has said that playing SpongeBob gave him great freedom to improvise, and that despite 25 years in the role, it never feels stale because the character always has somewhere new to go. And you know what? I believe him, because SpongeBob's voice is the voice of the Krusty Krab. It is the sound you hear when you think of this restaurant, that high, eager, genuine sound of someone who cannot wait to get to work. And Kenny has been doing it for so long that the voice and the character have become inseparable. You cannot imagine the Krusty Krab without that voice behind the order window. You cannot imagine the grill without that giggle. SpongeBob SquarePants averages more than 100 million total viewers every quarter, according to Nickelodeon. And Kenny's voice is in every single one of those viewings. Speaking of voices in the Krusty Krab, I also need to mention Roger Bumpass, who voices Squidward. Because Squidward's voice at the Krusty Krab is doing something very specific. It is the voice of someone who has given up. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a flat, nasal, exhausted sound that says, "I am here. I do not want to be here, and I will be here again tomorrow." And what Bumpass does so well is make that resignation funny without ever losing the sadness underneath it. Every time Squidward says, "Can I help you?" in that dead monotone, you are hearing a man who once dreamed of being an artist. That is in the voice. Bumpass puts it there, which is why the episode Selling Out, Season 4, Episode 5A, hit the way it did. In that episode, a wealthy man named Howard Blandy offers to buy the Krusty Krab for an enormous sum of money, and Mr. Krabs sells. He retires, and the restaurant gets taken over by a corporation that turns it into a soulless chain called Krabby Mondays. The patties become gray, synthetic, processed garbage squeezed out of a machine. An automated cash register replaces Squidward. Everything that made the Krusty Krab what it was gets stripped away in the name of efficiency and profit. And Mr. Krabs, the cheapest character on television, buys the restaurant back at full price. Because when it comes down to it, the Krusty Krab is not just money to him. It is him. And I need you to think about how dark that is for a second. The show created an episode where a small business gets absorbed by a faceless corporation. The food becomes fake. The workers become dispensable. And the original owner has to fight to get it back. That aired on Nickelodeon for children in 2005. And it is, without exaggeration, a more honest critique of corporate consolidation than most adult shows have ever attempted. Let me take you through a few episodes that I think reveal something crucial about the Krusty Krab that most people walk right past. Because the show has been hiding an incredible amount of detail in these stories, and once you start pulling the threads, the whole thing unravels into something much more layered than you expect. Start with Pickles, Season 1, Episode 6B, aired August 21st, 1999. This is the episode where Bubble Bass, this massive, smug, condescending fish, who I am convinced is one of the most underrated recurring characters in the show, comes into the Krusty Krab and orders a Krabby Patty. And when he gets it, he claims SpongeBob forgot the pickles. He says it in front of everyone, and SpongeBob, who has never once made a mistake on the grill, completely falls apart. He goes into a full existential crisis. He forgets how to make Krabby Patties. He forgets how to do anything. His house becomes a wreck. His furniture is upside down. He is wearing his underwear on his head. And here is the thing that makes this episode work. SpongeBob's identity is so completely tied to being the Krusty Krab's fry cook that one accusation of failure, one suggestion that he might not be perfect at his job, destroys him as a person. That is not played for laughs. I mean, it is played for laughs. It is hilarious. But it is also genuinely unsettling when you think about what it means. SpongeBob does not have hobbies that sustain him the way this job does. He does not have an identity outside the grill. Take away his ability to make a Krabby Patty, and you take away his sense of self. And the twist at the end, where SpongeBob discovers that Bubble Bass was hiding the pickles under his tongue the whole time, is satisfying precisely because it restores SpongeBob's identity. He was not wrong. He did not fail. The Krusty Krab did not betray him. Everything is okay. This time. But the show is not always that generous. In Born Again Crabs, Season 3, Episode 16, which aired on October 4th, 2003, we get one of the most genuinely distressing Krusty Krab episodes in the show's history. Mr. Krabs finds an old, rotten Krabby Patty under the grill. A disgustingly moldy, decomposing patty that no sane person would look at, let alone eat. And Mr. Krabs tries to sell it, because throwing it away would be waste. And wasting money, wasting anything, is something Mr. Krabs physically cannot do. SpongeBob begs him not to serve it. Mr. Krabs tries it himself and ends up in the hospital. And then the Flying Dutchman shows up. The Dutchman takes Mr. Krabs to Davy Jones's locker, which in SpongeBob's world is literally a locker full of smelly gym socks. And he gives Krabs a choice. He can come back to life if he proves he is not the cheapest, most selfish creature in the ocean. And Krabs tries. He really does. He starts being generous at the Krusty Krab, giving away free food, letting customers have whatever they want. And for a moment, you think maybe he has changed. Maybe the brush with death actually scared the greed out of him. And then Plankton shows up. He asks Mr. Krabs how much he would take for SpongeBob, and the Dutchman makes it real. He says, "Give me SpongeBob, or give me the change in your pocket, 62 cents. And Mr. Krabs, without hesitating, takes the money. He sells his most loyal employee to the Flying Dutchman for 62 cents. And the show does not soften this. Squidward is horrified. SpongeBob is heartbroken. There is a moment where SpongeBob looks at Mr. Krabs, and you can see it on his face. This realization that the person he has devoted his entire life to serving does not value him at all. It gets resolved, obviously. SpongeBob comes back. The status quo is restored. But that moment hangs in the air for the rest of the series if you are paying attention. Mr. Krabs chose 62 cents over SpongeBob. And SpongeBob went back to work the next day. That is the Krusty Krab. That is what the show is doing with this restaurant. It is building this incredibly detailed, lived-in workplace that is simultaneously a haven and a prison, a dream and a nightmare, depending on which character you are watching. And I want to go deeper on the workplace dynamic by talking about what happens when other characters try to work at the Krusty Krab. Because the show has this recurring motif where someone new enters the workspace, and it always goes wrong. And the way it goes wrong reveals something about what the Krusty Krab actually requires of the people inside it. Big Pink Loser, Season 2, Episode 3A, aired November 16th, 2000. Patrick Star gets a job at the Krusty Krab. Patrick, who lives under a rock, who is possibly the least qualified person in Bikini Bottom for any job, walks into this restaurant and becomes an employee. And the results are catastrophic. He is supposed to deliver food to a customer. He eats it instead, every time. SpongeBob breaks down the process step by step, and Patrick still eats the food. He answers the phone and gets furious because the caller keeps calling him Krusty Krab. "No, this is Patrick," he screams, over and over, not realizing the callers are asking for the restaurant, not addressing him by name. He tries to sweep the floor and uses the wrong end of the broom. Everything he touches falls apart. And you know what that phone gag became? One of the most famous SpongeBob memes in internet history. Is this the Krusty Krab? No. This is Patrick. It is everywhere. It has been shared millions of times across every social media platform that has ever existed. And it came from a throwaway bit in a Season 2 episode about Patrick being bad at his job. That is the thing about SpongeBob and the Krusty Krab. The show generates cultural moments almost accidentally, just by being deeply, specifically, absurdly itself. But the real point of Patrick working at the Krusty Krab is what it reveals about SpongeBob. Patrick fails at everything SpongeBob does effortlessly, and SpongeBob does not understand the failure. He cannot comprehend how someone could struggle with the things he finds natural: making a Krabby Patty, delivering food, answering the phone. These are the simplest things in the world to SpongeBob. They are his purpose. And watching Patrick struggle throws SpongeBob's own gift into sharp relief. Patrick eventually gets an award for doing absolutely nothing longer than anyone else. He goes back under his rock, and SpongeBob goes back to the grill. The Krusty Krab does not accept just anyone. It has standards. And those standards, strangely enough, are set by SpongeBob's passion, not by Mr. Krabs' management. There is another episode that explores this from a completely different angle. Welcome to the Chum Bucket. Season 2, Episode 14. This is the one where Mr. Krabs loses SpongeBob in a card game to Plankton. That is right. Mr. Krabs gambled his best employee's contract and lost. And the backstory is incredible. Apparently, Plankton is the worst card player in Bikini Bottom. Krabs had been beating him every Thursday night for 15 years. 15 years. But Plankton reveals he had been throwing those games intentionally, waiting for the exact moment when Krabs would get overconfident and bet something he should not. And when Krabs bets SpongeBob's contract, Plankton strikes. And SpongeBob has to leave the Krusty Krab. He has to go work at the Chum Bucket, and he cannot do it. Not because Plankton is cruel, not because the Chum Bucket is terrible, but because SpongeBob cannot cook without the Krusty Krab. His talent is tied to the building, to the grill, to the specific environment that nurtured it. Away from the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob is diminished. He cannot make a good patty. He cannot find the rhythm. It is like taking a musician out of their studio and putting them in a warehouse. The tools might be the same, but the soul is missing. And that tells you something profound about the Krusty Krab. It is not just where SpongeBob works. It is the condition that makes his work possible. His genius is not portable. It is rooted in this specific place, with these specific people, in this specific trap. Remove any of those elements, and the magic disappears. The Krusty Krab is not a workplace. It is an ecosystem, and there is Krab Borg. Season 3, Episode 9A, aired March 29th, 2002. This is one of the funniest episodes in the entire series, and it all takes place inside the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob watches a scary movie about robots taking over the world. The next day at work, he becomes convinced that Mr. Krabs is a robot. Why? Because Krabs talks to his radio. Because he dances strangely. Because he says he feels recharged. Because he makes beep-boop sounds while talking on the phone. All perfectly normal things that SpongeBob, in his paranoid state, interprets as evidence of robot replacement. He convinces Squidward. The two of them corner Mr. Krabs in the kitchen and interrogate him, destroying his possessions one by one to see if there are wires inside. His radio, his naval clock, everything he values. And Krabs watches his treasured belongings get smashed, not understanding why his employees are doing this. Until finally, he starts crying and laughing and talking about love. The three things robots in the movie could not do. And SpongeBob and Squidward realize he is not a robot. He was never a robot. They just destroyed all of his stuff for nothing. That episode is hilarious. It is a perfectly constructed farce. But it is also doing something with the Krusty Krab space that I think is brilliant. It turns the kitchen into an interrogation room. The same kitchen where SpongeBob makes Krabby Patties with love and care becomes the place where he destroys his boss's possessions in a paranoid frenzy. The space does not change. The furniture does not move, but the function completely inverts. The Krusty Krab is a stage, and the show is always finding new plays to perform on it. Let me talk about what happens when the lights go out. Because the nighttime episodes, the after-hours episodes, the ones that take place when the Krusty Krab is supposed to be closed, those are some of the most revealing episodes the show ever made. Graveyard Shift. Season 2, Episode 16. Aired September 6th, 2002. Mr. Krabs decides the Krusty Krab is going to stay open 24 hours. Not because there is demand. Not because customers are clamoring for late-night Krabby Patties. Because he wants the money. And this decision traps SpongeBob and Squidward in the restaurant after dark, in a building that was never meant to feel scary, but suddenly, without the daylight and the customers, feels very, very different. And Squidward tells the story of the hash-slinging slasher. This made-up tale about a former Krusty Krab fry cook who accidentally cut off his own hand, replaced it with a rusty spatula, got hit by a bus, was fired at his own funeral, and now returns every Tuesday night to haunt the restaurant. It is a campfire story. Squidward makes it up to scare SpongeBob, and it works. SpongeBob is terrified. But then the episode does something brilliant. The signs of the hash-slinging slasher start actually happening. The lights flicker. The phone rings with nobody on the other end. A bus shows up outside, and even Squidward starts to get scared. The reveal is perfect. The flickering lights are caused by Nosferatu flipping the switch, which is an absurd, inexplicable joke that has no business being in a children's cartoon and is absolutely perfect. The phone calls are coincidental, and the figure arriving on the bus is just a nervous kid applying for a job. But for those few minutes, the show turned the Krusty Krab into a horror movie set. And the fact that it could do that, the fact that the same building that hosts SpongeBob's happiest moments can also be the setting for genuine tension, tells you everything about how layered this location really is. And Nasty Patty. Season 3, Episode 480, aired March 1st, 2002. This is the one where a health inspector comes to the Krusty Krab, and Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob hear on the news that someone has been impersonating health inspectors to get free food. They assume their guy is the fake, so they make a disgusting Krabby Patty, the Nasty Patty, loaded with every gross thing they can think of. And before the inspector can eat it, a fly lands in his mouth. He chokes, and they think he is dead. They think they killed the health inspector. And the entire rest of the episode is SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs trying to hide a body in a children's cartoon. They bury it. It keeps coming back. The inspector, who is not actually dead, keeps appearing behind them like something out of a horror film. And the whole time, the Krusty Krab kitchen, this place of warmth and comfort and perfectly made Krabby Patties, has become a crime scene. That episode won a Golden Reel Award in 2002 for Best Sound Editing in Television Animation. And it earned it. The sound design in Nasty Patty is genuinely unnerving. The creaking of the floorboards, the dripping, the tension. This is a Nickelodeon cartoon doing a body horror comedy inside a fast food restaurant, and pulling it off with more craft than most adult horror shows manage. I think what Hillenberg and his team understood is that the Krusty Krab is the perfect stage for this kind of genre play, because it is so familiar. Everyone knows what a fast food restaurant looks and feels like. Everyone has been inside one late at night when it is empty, and the lights are a little too bright, and the world outside the windows is a little too dark. The Krusty Krab taps into that universal familiarity, and because we are so comfortable there, when the show shifts tone, when it goes dark or scary or emotionally devastating, the impact is that much stronger. Now let me circle back to something I mentioned earlier about the relationship between Mr. Krabs and Plankton, because the Krusty Krab versus Chum Bucket dynamic is one of the richest pieces of storytelling in this entire show, and I think it deserves more attention than it usually gets. Sheldon J. Plankton and Eugene Krabs were born on the same day. They grew up together. They were both outcasts, both bullied, Plankton for being too smart, Krabs for being too poor, and they found each other in that shared exclusion. These were two kids who had nobody else, and so they had each other. And then they tried to make something together. A restaurant, a burger recipe, a future, and it fell apart. The episode Friend or Foe gives us the whole story. They were working on their recipe, they argued about it, and in the process, the recipe tore in half. Plankton ended up with a piece that he used to start the Chum Bucket, selling food made from chum, which is essentially fish guts. Krabs ended up with the other piece, the one that would become the Krabby Patty formula. And the implication is haunting. Everything that followed, the decades of rivalry, the hundreds of schemes, the endless war between two restaurants separated by a single street, all of it traces back to a fight between two childhood best friends over a recipe they were supposed to share. I need you to think about that for a second. The entire Krusty Krab versus Chum Bucket rivalry, which might be the longest running conflict in the show, is not really about business. It is about a broken friendship. Plankton does not want the formula just because it will make him rich. He wants it because it was supposed to be his too. And Krabs does not protect the formula just because it keeps his restaurant profitable. He protects it because it is the one thing he got, and Plankton did not. It is a trophy from the moment their lives diverged. And every time Plankton tries to steal it, he is not just committing corporate espionage. He is trying to reclaim a piece of the life he was supposed to have. The Chum Bucket sits directly across the street from the Krusty Krab. Think about that geography. Plankton chose to build his restaurant right there. Not down the road. Not in another part of Bikini Bottom. Right across the street, where he can see the Krusty Krab every single day. Where he can watch the customers line up for the burgers that were supposed to be his. Where he can wake up every morning and be confronted with exactly what he lost. And the Chum Bucket never has any customers. The food is terrible. Chum is, by its very nature, disgusting. There is an episode called Plankton's Regular, Season 6, where Plankton finally gets a single regular customer, a fish named Nat, who comes in every day for a chum stick. And Plankton is overjoyed. For the first time in his life, someone chose his restaurant. Someone came back. And then the episode reveals that Karen, Plankton's computer wife, was paying Nat to eat there. It was never real. Even his one customer was fake. And the episode ends with Plankton seeing Nat in the Krusty Krab, eating a Krabby Patty with everyone else. That is devastatingly sad. I know we are supposed to root against Plankton. He is the villain. He schemes and plots and threatens. But this show keeps showing you why he is the way he is. He is a genius, married to a computer, in a restaurant nobody visits, staring across the street at the life that could have been his. Okay, I have been going deep on the emotional stuff, and I realize I have not talked enough about the comedy, because the Krusty Krab is also, and I need to stress this, one of the funniest settings in the history of animated television. The comedy that happens in this building is so dense, so well crafted, so perfectly timed, that I think it sometimes gets overlooked in favor of the deeper analysis. But the depth and the humor are not separate things. They are the same thing. The comedy works because the characters are real. The characters are real because the comedy does not protect them. Take Pizza Delivery, Season 1, Episode 5A. Aired August 14th, 1999. The Krusty Krab gets a phone order for a pizza. The Krusty Krab does not sell pizza. Mr. Krabs does not care. A customer wants pizza. The customer gets pizza. So he sends SpongeBob and Squidward out to deliver it. And the entire episode is about the delivery. SpongeBob cannot drive. He is still in boating school. They end up stranded in the middle of nowhere. SpongeBob finds a rock and claims that pioneers used to ride them for miles. And eventually, they make it to the customer's house. The customer opens the door, sees that they forgot his drink, and slams the door in SpongeBob's face. Does not take the pizza. Does not care that SpongeBob nearly died getting it there. Just shuts the door. And SpongeBob cries. Genuinely. He is standing on this doorstep, holding a pizza box, and he is crying because he failed. Because a customer was not happy. And Squidward, who has spent the entire episode complaining and being miserable and wanting nothing more than to go home, takes the pizza, walks up to the door, and smashes it in the customer's face. Variety ranked that the third best episode of the entire show. And I think the reason it resonates so much is that moment. That specific moment where Squidward defends SpongeBob. Because Squidward does not care about the Krusty Krab. He does not care about pizza delivery. He does not care about customer service. But he cares about SpongeBob. Not always. Not consistently. But in this moment, in this one specific moment, Squidward sees someone hurt the one person in his life who has never been anything but kind to him, and he does something about it. And the Krusty Krab made that moment possible. The job, the delivery, the shared misery of working for Mr. Krabs, it put them in a situation where that connection could surface. And if you have made it this far, you already know this is not a light video. We are deep into the lore of a fictional restaurant, and somehow it keeps getting more interesting, because there is another layer I want to pull back, and it has to do with the way the Krusty Krab changes. One of the things that makes this location so rich is that the show keeps reinventing it. The Krusty Krab is not just a static set. Over 25 years, it has been a hotel, a nightclub, a theater, a prison, a monster movie set, a competitive cooking arena, and about a dozen other things. And every time the show transforms it, it reveals something new. Krusty Towers, Season 4, Episode 9A, aired April 1st, 2006. The title is a direct parody of Fawlty Towers, the legendary British sitcom, and the premise is pure Mr. Krabs. He stays at a fancy hotel, sees the prices they charge, and immediately decides to turn the Krusty Krab into a hotel. The motto he adopts is, "We shall never deny a guest, even the most ridiculous request." And the comedy comes from Mr. Krabs being forced to live by that motto when Squidward, who has had enough of being exploited, checks in as a guest and starts making the most absurd demands imaginable. The episode is brilliant because it takes the existing Krusty Krab power dynamic, boss versus employees, and flips it. Squidward, for once, has leverage. He is the customer now, and he uses that leverage to do exactly what Mr. Krabs has been doing to him for years, making unreasonable demands with no concern for the person who has to fulfill them. It is Squidward holding up a mirror to his own exploitation, and the reflection is hilarious and uncomfortable in equal measure. The whole thing ends with Patrick jumping into a swimming pool on the upper floor, causing the entire Krusty Towers to collapse. The structure literally cannot support the weight of its own excess, which, if you want to read it that way, is not a bad metaphor for what happens when you push a system designed for one thing into serving something it was never built for. Let me take a tangent here, because I want to talk about Dying for Pie. Season 2, Episode 4A, aired January 27th, 2001. Now, this is not technically a Krusty Krab episode in the way the others are, but it starts at the Krusty Krab, and it is about the Krusty Krab's version of workplace culture. And I think it is one of the most quietly devastating episodes the show ever produced. It is Employee Brotherhood Day. Mr. Krabs tells Squidward and SpongeBob they have to exchange gifts. SpongeBob gives Squidward a sweater made entirely from his own eyelashes, which is both gross and genuinely touching. Squidward, who cannot be bothered, buys a pie from a group of pirates in the back alley. Except the pie is a bomb, an actual bomb. And when Squidward realizes this, he and Mr. Krabs become convinced that SpongeBob has eaten it and will die at sunset. And here's where the episode transforms. Squidward, believing SpongeBob has hours left to live, decides to spend the day with him. He goes jellyfishing. He watches the sunset. He does all the things SpongeBob has been begging him to do for years. All the things Squidward has always rejected with contempt and irritation. And SpongeBob does not know why. He just thinks Squidward is finally being his friend. And Squidward is doing it because he thinks SpongeBob is about to die. And he feels guilty that he never appreciated him. The reveal that SpongeBob never ate the pie, that he saved it to share with Squidward as a special moment between friends, is beautiful. But then, SpongeBob trips, the pie hits Squidward in the face, and the entire town explodes in a live-action nuclear explosion. And that is the episode. It starts with a mandatory workplace gift exchange at the Krusty Krab, and ends with a nuclear detonation. And somehow, both of those things feel emotionally consistent. I think about this episode a lot because of what it says about Squidward's relationship to the Krusty Krab. The only reason Squidward bought that pie from pirates was because the Krusty Krab demanded he participate in Employee Brotherhood Day. He did not want to get a gift. He did not want to bond with SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs forced this interaction, this expression of workplace camaraderie, and it almost killed everyone. And still, the forced interaction created a genuine moment between two people. Squidward had the best day of his life with SpongeBob, because the Krusty Krab for all its dysfunction, keeps putting these characters in proximity, and proximity, even forced proximity, sometimes creates something real. I want to take another tangent here because there is an episode I have been thinking about non-stop while putting this together. Krusty Love, Season 2, Episode 16B. It aired on September 6th, 2002, the same night as Graveyard Shift. And while Graveyard Shift gets all the attention, Krusty Love is doing something with Mr. Krabs and the Krusty Krab that I think deserves way more analysis. In this episode, Mr. Krabs falls in love with Mrs. Puff, SpongeBob's boating school teacher. She comes into the Krusty Krab one day, and Krabs is immediately smitten. And he starts spending money on her. Massive amounts of money. On their first date alone, the bill comes to $100,000, and Krabs screams so loudly that it shatters the restaurant they are dining in. So for the second date, he gives SpongeBob his wallet and tells him not to let Krabs spend any more money. But then, Krabs keeps ordering SpongeBob to buy Mrs. Puff things. Flowers, chocolates, increasingly expensive and unnecessary gifts. And when SpongeBob reminds him that he said not to spend money, Krabs yells at him for letting him spend money. He is stuck in a loop. He wants to impress Mrs. Puff, but every dollar he spends causes him physical pain. And here's the ending that gets me. Mrs. Puff, who is kind and sensible and does not need any of this, tells Krabs she is not comfortable with the gifts. She offers to go Dutch. She hands him some money. She kisses him on the cheek, and Krabs is completely destroyed by this kindness. She did not need the $100,000 dinner. She did not need the gifts. She just needed him to be present. And the Krusty Krab created this moment because it is where they met. She walked into his restaurant, the one place where he feels powerful, where he is in control, where his money means something, and she walked out with his heart. In a building where everything has a price tag, she showed him something free. I do not think the show meant for that to be as deep as it sounds, but I have been sitting with this stuff for days now, and everything starts to connect. And then there is Krabby Land, Season 3. This is the one where Mr. Krabs notices children playing outside during summer break and decides to exploit them by building an amusement park in the Krusty Krab parking lot. He promises them a character called Krabby the Clown who will appear and entertain them. Parents bring their kids. The kids spend money. The rides are dangerous, rusted out junk. And SpongeBob, who is put in charge of entertaining the kids while they wait, realizes that the only thing making them happy is watching him injure himself. So he starts intentionally getting hurt. He hires 2 thugs to beat him up. The kids love it. And when Krabby the Clown finally arrives, it is just Mr. Krabs with a tomato on his nose, doing the laziest clown impression imaginable. The kids revolt. They get their money back. Krabs is forced to eat a truck full of lima beans as punishment. And okay, this is a goofy episode. It is not one of the deep ones, but I include it because it shows another dimension of the Krusty Krab. The restaurant does not just exploit its workers. It will exploit anyone, children, tourists, anyone who walks through the door with money in their pockets. The Krusty Krab is an extraction machine. It takes money from customers and gives as little as possible in return. Mr. Krabs is not a restaurateur. He is a toll collector. The Krabby Patty is just the toll. And yet, people keep coming. The restaurant is always full. The Krabby Patties are always selling. Because the product is good. That is the tension the show keeps coming back to. The Krusty Krab is a terrible business run by a greedy man who exploits everyone around him, and the food is genuinely, transcendently delicious. The product is real, even when the business practices are not. And I think that tension between good work and bad management, between quality output and exploitative systems, is something a lot of people recognize from their own lives. You can work at a terrible company and still be proud of what you make. The two things coexist. The Krusty Krab knows this. The show knows this. And it never pretends otherwise. There is also the question of the Krusty Krab's relationship to its own mythology. What I mean by that is the way the show treats SpongeBob's craft as something almost sacred. Consider Neptune's spatula. Season 1, Episode 19B, aired April 1st, 2000. SpongeBob and Patrick visit the Fry Cook Hall of Fame, which is a museum dedicated entirely to the history and art of fry cooking. And inside, there is a golden spatula embedded in a vat of ancient grease. like Excalibur in the stone, and nobody can pull it out. Until SpongeBob, without even trying, yanks it free. This summons King Neptune himself, the god of the sea, who cannot believe that this tiny yellow sponge could be worthy of the legendary spatula. So they have a cook-off. Neptune versus SpongeBob. 1,000 burgers versus 1. And Neptune wins on speed. He makes 1,000 burgers in the time SpongeBob takes to make a single patty. But when the audience tastes Neptune's burgers, they are terrible, flavorless, made with power and speed, but no care. SpongeBob's single patty is perfect, and SpongeBob wins. Not because he is faster, not because he is stronger, because he makes each patty with love. And the show is not being corny here. It is making a real argument about craft. Speed is not quality. Volume is not skill. One perfect Krabby Patty, made by someone who cares, is worth more than 1,000 slapped together by a god. And SpongeBob, instead of accepting a spot in Neptune's kingdom, chooses to stay at the Krusty Krab. He turns down Atlantis. He turns down royalty. He stays behind the grill. Because that is where he makes the best food. That is where his craft lives. And then, the episode ends with King Neptune becoming a trainee under SpongeBob at the Krusty Krab. A literal deity, learning to cook from a fry cook in a lobster trap. That image alone tells you everything about what this show thinks the Krusty Krab is. It is not just a workplace. It is a school, a temple, a place where the act of making food is elevated to something worth a god's attention. This is where I want to take a wider view, because if you step back and look at the Krusty Krab across the entire run of SpongeBob SquarePants, you start to see patterns that I think are really illuminating. The first 3 seasons, seasons 1 through 3, what fans call the Hillenberg era, because he was directly involved as showrunner. The Krusty Krab is primarily a comedy stage. It is the place where funny things happen to funny characters. But even in this era, the show is planting seeds of something deeper. The labor exploitation in Squid on Strike, the identity crisis in Pickles, the existential terror of Graveyard Shift. These are not just jokes. They are the show quietly establishing that this restaurant is a microcosm of something larger. And speaking of Hillenberg, let me talk about his time at CalArts for a moment, because I think it is directly connected to what the Krusty Krab became. Hillenberg earned his master's in experimental animation from CalArts in 1992. Before that, he was a marine biologist, teaching kids about sea creatures. His thesis project at CalArts drew on his marine biology background, and his interest in tide pools merged with his passion for art to create something entirely new. He had already created a comic called The Intertidal Zone while teaching, and the character of Bob the Sponge from that comic, which resembled a realistic sea sponge, eventually evolved into SpongeBob SquarePants. Hillenberg said he initially kept the realistic sponge design because it was the biologically correct thing to do as a marine science teacher. The shift to the rectangular kitchen sponge came later, and it changed everything. But the point is that Hillenberg came to animation from a completely different world. He was not a lifelong cartoonist. He was a scientist who fell in love with art. And I think that outsider perspective is exactly what made SpongeBob and the Krusty Krab so special. A traditional animator might have created a more conventional underwater world. Hillenberg created a world where a fry cook in a lobster trap is the most important person in the ocean, where the mundanity of work is treated with the same reverence that other shows give to epic quests, where a fast food restaurant is the most detailed, most revisited, most emotionally rich location in the entire show. That is a marine biologist's sensibility. That is someone who spent years studying the beauty of small, specific, easily overlooked things, tide pools, and intertidal zones, and then applied that same loving attention to the world of minimum wage food service. After the first SpongeBob SquarePants movie in 2004, things changed. Hillenberg had intended the movie to be the series finale. The story ends with SpongeBob being promoted to manager of the Krusty Krab 2. A second restaurant, Mr. Krabs, opens right next to the original. It is a perfect ending. SpongeBob goes on an epic journey, proves he is not just a kid, saves Bikini Bottom, and gets his dream job. The hero's journey completed. Credits roll. The end. Except Nickelodeon wanted more episodes. The show was too profitable to end. So Hillenberg stepped back as showrunner, handing the role to Paul Tibbitt, and the show continued. And in the post-movie era, the Krusty Krab shifted. The comedy became broader. Mr. Krabs became meaner. The exploitation became less subtle. And a lot of fans felt the change. The golden age was over, people said. The show lost its soul. And while I do not fully agree with that, I think the way the Krusty Krab was portrayed in those middle seasons is telling. In the later seasons, Mr. Krabs' cheapness went from a character flaw to his entire personality. He fired SpongeBob over a nickel in SpongeBob You're Fired, Season 9. That episode aired in 2013 and generated actual political controversy. Media Matters for America and MSNBC's Al Sharpton accused Fox News and the New York Post of using the episode in arguments against food stamps and social services. A Nickelodeon cartoon about a sponge getting fired from a burger joint became a talking point in American political discourse. And honestly, I think that says more about the power of the Krusty Krab as a symbol than any analysis I could offer. People saw themselves in this restaurant. They saw their own workplaces, their own bosses, their own dispensability. And look, I want to be clear about something. I am not saying the later seasons are all bad. That is an oversimplification that the fan community has been wrestling with for years. The Golden Age debate, seasons 1 through 3 versus everything after, is one of the oldest and most heated conversations in the SpongeBob fandom. And I think the truth is more nuanced. There are great episodes in the later seasons. Krusty Towers, which we already talked about, is from season 4, and it is phenomenal. There are moments in seasons 9 through 12 where the show finds new things to say. The animation actually improved in many ways. The visual comedy became more inventive, but the Krusty Krab's role in the show shifted. In the Hillenberg era, the restaurant was a stage for exploring genuine human complexity. In the post-movie era, it sometimes became a stage for spectacle. The episodes got louder. The scenarios got wilder. Mr. Krabs' cheapness went from being a character flaw that informed stories to being a punchline machine that drove them. And the specific, quiet moments, the Squidward at the window moments, the SpongeBob crying on a doorstep moments became rarer, not absent, just rarer. And I think Hillenberg knew this. When he returned to the show as an executive producer around season 9B, you can feel the shift back. The show started finding its footing again. The Krusty Krab started being used for more nuanced stories. And then Hillenberg was diagnosed with ALS in 2017, and he died in 2018. And the show had to figure out what it was without him. And it is still figuring that out. The SpongeBob franchise now includes Camp Corral, SpongeBob's Underyears, and The Patrick Star Show, both spin-offs that expand the universe in ways Hillenberg did not envision. It has generated over $500 million in box office revenue across 3 films. It has a Broadway musical that earned 12 Tony Award nominations. It is the most widely distributed property in Viacom history, seen in more than 208 countries. And through all of that expansion, the Krusty Krab remains. It is in every version of the franchise. It is the constant, the thing that does not change, even as everything around it does. But the Krusty Krab is more than just a symbol of workplace dysfunction. It is also, and this is the part that makes SpongeBob such a complicated, rewarding show, a place of genuine warmth. Because for all the exploitation, all the cheapness, all the moments where Mr. Krabs chooses money over his employees, the Krusty Krab is also where SpongeBob is happiest. It is where he has his best moments. It is where he became friends with Squidward, whether Squidward likes it or not. It is where he proves every single day that he is extraordinary at something, even if that something is making burgers. I have been thinking a lot about this duality, and I think it mirrors something real about how people relate to work. You can hate your job and love it at the same time. You can know you are being exploited and still find meaning in what you do. You can resent your boss and still feel loyal to the place. The Krusty Krab holds all of these contradictions simultaneously, and the show never resolves them. It does not tell you that work is good or work is bad. It tells you that work is complicated. And I think that is why this show resonates with adults in a way that most kids' shows do not. Because adults know that complexity. They live it every day. let me talk about something that I think is one of the most underappreciated aspects of the Krusty Krab's lore: the customers. Because the show has built an entire ecosystem of background characters who eat at this restaurant, and they are doing more narrative work than you might think. There is Bubble Bass, who I mentioned earlier, the large, snobbish fish who first appears in pickles and later becomes a recurring character. Bubble Bass is interesting because he represents the worst kind of customer, the kind who comes in not to enjoy the food, but to assert power over the person making it. He hides the pickles under his tongue. He makes SpongeBob feel inadequate. He is the embodiment of the customer who is always right, even when he is lying to your face. And then there are the anchovies, the swarm that appears in the very first episode. They do not speak in any recognizable language. They just chant meep over and over. They descend on the Krusty Krab like a natural disaster. Not individuals, but a mass, a horde, an undifferentiated wave of consumer demand. And SpongeBob feeds them all. He matches the pace of their hunger with the speed of his cooking, and it is exhilarating to watch. But it is also terrifying if you think about it from a labor perspective. One fry cook, alone, expected to meet the demands of an infinite customer base. There is no backup. There is no support. Just SpongeBob and his spatula and an endless hunger. The recurring customers at the Krusty Krab are often nameless. They are designated by production codes: Incidental 40, Incidental 41. They sit at the steering wheel tables and eat their Krabby Patties and go home. They are rarely individuated. They are a background presence, a revenue stream, the faceless masses who keep Mr. Krabs in business. And the show occasionally uses them to make a point. In Patty Hype Season 2, SpongeBob creates pretty patties, colorful Krabby Patties in every shade imaginable, and the customers go wild for them. They form massive lines. SpongeBob becomes more successful than the Krusty Krab itself. Mr. Krabs, jealous, offers to trade the entire Krusty Krab for SpongeBob's pretty patty stand. And SpongeBob, who loves the Krusty Krab more than anything, agrees. He takes the restaurant. Krabs takes the stand, and within hours, the customers come back furious. The pretty patties turned their bodies and tongues the color of whatever patty they ate. And now, Krabs is stuck with a failed business and an angry mob, while SpongeBob is back where he wanted to be all along. Behind the Grill, at the Krusty Krab. That episode aired on February 24th, 2001. And here's the thing. This was only the second season. The show had barely started, and it was already asking questions about entrepreneurship, brand identity, and what happens when you prioritize flash over substance. Pretty Patties are the startup that disrupts the market and collapses overnight. The Krabby Patty is the family recipe that weathers every storm. SpongeBob, for all his innocence, accidentally built a business empire in an afternoon and then happily handed it over because the empire was never the point. The patty was the point. The craft was the point. And Mr. Krabs, the supposed businessman, the one who should understand markets, could not see the difference between a fad and a product. He grabbed the shiny object and got burned. I want to linger on this because I think it connects to something the show does consistently with the Krusty Krab that does not get enough attention. The restaurant has been, at various times, a metaphor for every kind of business failure and success. It has been disrupted by corporations in selling out. It has been replaced by a hotel in Krusty Towers. It has been abandoned when SpongeBob is fired. It has been overrun by children in Krabbyland. It has been competed against by Pretty Patties and the Chum Bucket and chain restaurants and amusement parks. And it survives all of them, every single time. Because the product is good, and the fry cook cares. That is it. That is the whole business model. Good product, passionate employee. Everything else, the management, the marketing, the expansion plans, all of it is noise. The Krusty Krab works because SpongeBob stands at the grill and makes each Krabby Patty like it is the most important thing he has ever done. And you know what? For a kids show, that is a genuinely radical message. In a world that worships disruption and scale and growth at all costs, SpongeBob SquarePants created a restaurant that succeeds through consistency and care. It is not the biggest restaurant in Bikini Bottom. It is not the most innovative. It does not have a marketing department or a social media strategy or venture capital funding. It has a sponge with a spatula and a secret recipe, and the kind of devotion to craft that you cannot manufacture or scale. And the show treats that as enough, more than enough, as everything. And I think about the Krusty Krab in the context of Mr. Lawrence, who voices Plankton. Lawrence was also a writer and storyboard artist on the show, one of the key creative minds behind many of SpongeBob's best episodes. And the character he voices, Plankton, is the anti-Krusty Krab. Everything Plankton does is about shortcuts, stealing the formula instead of inventing his own, using robots and mind control instead of talent, forcing people to eat at his restaurant instead of making food they want to eat. Plankton is the character who believes success is something you take, not something you earn. And the Krusty Krab, every single day, proves him wrong, not through confrontation, just through existence, by being open, by being full, by having a line out the door while the chum bucket sits empty. And that is the quiet genius of the Krusty Krab versus chum bucket rivalry. It is not really a rivalry at all. It is a demonstration. The Krusty Krab does not compete with the chum bucket. It does not need to. It just does what it does, and the results speak for themselves. Every customer who chooses a Krabby Patty over chum is making a statement about quality versus shortcuts, about care versus scheme, about SpongeBob versus Plankton. And the customers choose SpongeBob every time, without even knowing they are making a philosophical choice. They just know the food is good. And I think it is doing something really smart about the relationship between innovation and tradition. SpongeBob's Pretty Patties were new. They were exciting. They were colorful and different, and everyone wanted one. But they were also fundamentally flawed. They looked great, but they made people miserable. The Krabby Patty, by contrast, never changes. It is the same patty, made the same way, with the same secret formula. It is not exciting. It is not innovative. It is just good. And the show seems to be saying something about the value of consistency over novelty, about the danger of chasing trends, about how the thing that lasts is not always the thing that dazzles. And speaking of the Krabby Patty, let me take a moment to talk about what might be the single most philosophically complex scene in the entire show. Just One Bite, Season 3, Episode 3, B, aired October 5th, 2001. In this episode, Squidward claims he has never eaten a Krabby Patty, and that he hates them. SpongeBob is horrified. He begs Squidward to try one. Squidward refuses, and refuses, and refuses, until finally, to shut SpongeBob up, he takes one tiny bite, and his face changes. Something happens inside Squidward in that moment. His eyes go wide, and the music swells, and you can see it. The exact instant when Squidward realizes that the thing he has been dismissing, the thing he has been too proud and too miserable to try, is actually amazing. And when SpongeBob leaves, Squidward crawls through the garbage to dig up the rest of the patty. He eats it in secret, alone, ashamed. And then he breaks into the Krusty Krab at night to eat more. He becomes obsessed, addicted. He eats so many Krabby Patties that his body literally explodes. Not figuratively. He fills with patties until he pops. Now, there is a famous deleted scene from this episode where Squidward triggers a security system while breaking into the Krusty Krab. A bucket of gasoline falls on him, gets lit on fire, and he explodes. This scene was cut from most TV broadcasts and DVD releases after its initial airing, likely because it was too violent even by SpongeBob standards. But it existed. In the original version of the episode, the show showed Squidward being set on fire inside the Krusty Krab. And that tells you something about where the creative team was willing to go with this building as a setting. But beyond the physical comedy, Just One Bite is doing something quietly brilliant. It is about resistance and surrender. Squidward has built his entire identity at the Krusty Krab around not caring. Not caring about the food, not caring about the customers, not caring about SpongeBob's enthusiasm. His contempt is his armor, and the Krabby Patty breaks through it. One bite, and Squidward cannot pretend anymore. He has to admit that this thing he has been surrounded by every single day, this thing he has actively rejected, is something he desperately wants. And the shame of that wanting, the pride he has to swallow, is what makes the episode resonate so deeply. It is about vulnerability. It is about the walls we build around ourselves to avoid admitting that the things we dismiss might be the things we need. If you are watching this late at night, you know what I mean. We have all been Squidward, We have all refused to admit we want something, because admitting it feels like losing. And while we are on the subject of Squidward and the Krabby Patty, I want to connect this to something that happened later in the series that I think is one of the most forgotten pieces of Krusty Krab lore. There is an episode called Squid's Day Off, Season 2, Episode 1B, which aired on November 2nd, 2000. In this episode, Mr. Krabs has an accident and has to go to the hospital, and Squidward is left in charge of the restaurant. So Squidward does what anyone in his position would do. He gives himself the day off. He puts SpongeBob in charge of both the grill and the register and goes home, but he cannot relax. He is consumed by visions of SpongeBob destroying the Krusty Krab. He pictures SpongeBob setting fires, flooding the kitchen, burning money, and every time, Squidward rushes back to the restaurant only to find everything perfectly fine. SpongeBob is managing both jobs flawlessly. There is no crisis. There is no disaster. SpongeBob does not need Squidward. The Krusty Krab does not need Squidward. And that realization is what actually drives Squidward insane in this episode. Not the fear that things will go wrong. The fear that things will go perfectly without him. That he is dispensable. That the Krusty Krab, the place he hates, the job he despises, does not actually require his presence. He is not even important enough to be missed. And the episode ends with Squidward having welded his own door shut to stop himself from going back to check, running through the streets of Bikini Bottom without any clothes on, bursting into the Krusty Krab screaming, only to find SpongeBob calmly managing everything and a line of customers staring at him, including Mr. Krabs, who has returned from the hospital. I think this is one of the most psychologically sharp episodes in the show, because Squidward's anxiety is not about the Krusty Krab. It is about his own relevance. If the restaurant functions fine without him, what does that say about his 2 or 3 or however many years behind that register? Were they meaningless? Could anyone have done what he did? Is he replaceable? And the show does not answer those questions. It lets them hang. Because the answer, I think, is yes. Squidward is replaceable, and that truth is one of the cruelest things the Krusty Krab reveals about the nature of most jobs. Remember what I said earlier about the Krusty Krab being a trap? This is another dimension of the trap. It is not just that you cannot leave. It is that leaving would not matter. The trap does not need you specifically. It just needs someone, anyone. And the knowledge that you are interchangeable, that your years of service have not made you essential, is a kind of horror that the show communicates with startling clarity in 11 minutes. But then, there is the counter-argument. SpongeBob is not replaceable. The show makes that clear over and over. He is the one ingredient the Krusty Krab cannot substitute. When he leaves, the restaurant suffers. When he is sad, the patties taste wrong. When he forgets how to cook, the whole business collapses. SpongeBob is essential to the Krusty Krab in a way that Squidward is not, in a way that even Mr. Krabs is not. And the show never fully explains why. Is it his skill, his attitude, his love, his mysterious connection to the secret formula? All of the above? The show treats SpongeBob's talent as something almost mystical. He does not just make burgers. He creates something that cannot be replicated by robots, by gods, by alternate universe versions of the restaurant's owner. He is the secret ingredient, and the Krusty Krab knows it, even if Mr. Krabs does not always act like it. And that brings me to the first SpongeBob SquarePants movie from 2004, and what it means for the Krusty Krab. Because the movie is, in many ways, the ultimate Krusty Krab story. Mr. Krabs opens a second restaurant, the Krusty Krab 2, right next to the original. And SpongeBob expects to be named the manager. He has earned it. He has been the best employee for years. He has saved the restaurant countless times. He has turned down offers from King Neptune and other employers to stay loyal to Mr. Krabs. If anyone deserves a promotion, it is SpongeBob. And Mr. Krabs gives the job to Squidward, because SpongeBob is, in Krabs' words, just a kid. And that rejection sends SpongeBob into a spiral that drives the entire movie. He has to prove he is not just a kid. He has to prove he is worthy of more than the grill. And the adventure that follows, the journey to Shell City, the confrontation with Plankton, the rescue of King Neptune's crown, all of it is SpongeBob proving that the Krusty Krab made him into something more than a fry cook. The skills he learned there, the resilience, the optimism, the refusal to give up, those are the things that save Bikini Bottom. And at the end of the movie, Mr. Krabs does make SpongeBob the manager of the Krusty Krab too. It is the ending SpongeBob deserved. The hero's journey completed. The dream fulfilled. Hillenberg intended this to be the final moment of the series. SpongeBob, standing in front of his new restaurant, finally recognized for everything he is given. It is perfect. And then Nickelodeon ordered more episodes. And the next season, SpongeBob is back behind the grill at the original Krusty Krab. No mention of the Krusty Krab 2. No management position. No recognition. Just SpongeBob and his spatula and the same old lobster trap. And I know that is how television works. I know that the reset is a structural necessity for an episodic cartoon, but it is hard not to read it as something more. As the show itself acknowledging that in the Krusty Krab, there is no escape, no promotion, no graduation, just the grill, forever. Hillenberg fought for the movie to be the ending. Nickelodeon said no. The show was too profitable. And so the Krusty Krab, the building Hillenberg created from his own memories of working in a seafood restaurant, continued without the ending he wanted for it. Which, again, mirrors the show itself. Mr. Krabs would never close the Krusty Krab, no matter what. Even if it should be closed. Even if the story is over. Because there is always more money to make. Always more patties to sell. Always more episodes to produce. The Krusty Krab and the show that contains it are trapped in the same cycle. And Hillenberg saw that. He lived it. And eventually, he stepped back and let it happen. Here is something I think about randomly at, 2 in the morning. The Krusty Krab has been destroyed, rebuilt, transformed, and restored more times than I can count. In Krusty Towers, the entire building collapses. In the first movie, Plankton steals the formula and turns Bikini Bottom into a dystopia. In Selling Out, the restaurant becomes a corporate nightmare. In episodes across a dozen seasons, the building catches fire, floods, gets condemned, gets haunted, gets infested, and gets reduced to rubble. And every single time, it comes back. The next episode, there it is. Same lobster trap, same clam sign, same steering wheel tables, same kitchen, same grill. And I think that resilience is part of the lore too. The Krusty Krab is not just a building, it is an idea. It is the show's version of the status quo, but not in a lazy, nothing ever changes way. In a thematic way. The Krusty Krab survives because the characters need it to survive. SpongeBob needs somewhere to cook. Squidward needs somewhere to be miserable. Mr. Krabs needs somewhere to count his money. Plankton needs somewhere to target. The entire ecosystem of Bikini Bottom orbits around this restaurant. And without it, the show does not work. The Krusty Krab is not just the setting. It is the gravitational center. Let me pull at one more thread, because I think it is important. The Krusty Krab and the real world. Steven Hillenberg drew on his real experience as a fry cook to create this place. The building is a lobster trap. Mr. Krabs is based on a real manager. SpongeBob's devotion to the grill mirrors Hillenberg's own early experiences in food service. But the Krusty Krab also became real in ways Hillenberg probably never anticipated. In October of 2024, to celebrate SpongeBob's 25th anniversary, Wendy's launched a Krabby Patty collab. A real, limited-time Krabby Patty burger you could buy at actual Wendy's restaurants, along with fries and a pineapple vanilla frosty they called the Pineapple Under the Sea. And this generated controversy for a specific reason. During his lifetime, Hillenberg had conceived of the Krabby Patty as a veggie burger. Vincent Waller confirmed there was no meat in a Krabby Patty. And Hillenberg himself had personally opposed the use of his characters to market fast food to children. The Wendy's collaboration, with its beef-based square patties, was doing exactly what Hillenberg did not want. And it happened 6 years after his death. I am not going to tell you that is evil or wrong or an unforgivable corporate sin, but I think it matters. I think it is part of the Krusty Krab's lore, this tension between what the creator intended and what the corporation does with his creation. Because that tension is literally what the show is about. That is the plot of Selling Out. That is the entire point of Mr. Krabs' character. The thing that starts with love and passion and genuine care gets, over time, commodified, packaged, and sold to the highest bidder. And the irony of the Krabby Patty collab happening at a real fast food chain is so perfectly SpongeBob that you almost have to laugh. Almost. And then there is the Super Bowl. February 3rd, 2019. Less than 3 months after Steven Hillenberg died of ALS. Over 1.2 million people signed a petition on change.org asking the NFL to play Sweet Victory at the Super Bowl halftime show. Sweet Victory, the rock song from the Band Geeks episode, Season 2, Episode 15B, which aired on September 7th, 2001. The episode where Squidward forms a marching band from his Bikini Bottom neighbors and, after a disastrous rehearsal process, performs at the Bubble Bowl. And the performance is transcendent. SpongeBob takes the lead, the music swells, and for maybe the only time in the entire series, Squidward wins. He does not get humiliated. He does not fail. He gets his moment. And the audience goes wild. The petition was about honoring Hillenberg. It was about a generation of people saying, this show meant something to us, and we want to celebrate it on the biggest stage possible. And what they got at the halftime show was a brief animated clip of SpongeBob and Squidward introducing Travis Scott, who then played Sicko Mode. That was it. The bait and switch left fans devastated. Streams of Sweet Victory jumped 566% the next day, because people went and listened to it themselves since the NFL would not. And I bring this up because Band Geeks itself is a Krusty Krab episode, even though it does not take place in the restaurant. Because the dynamics that make Band Geeks work are the Krusty Krab dynamics. Squidward, the miserable artist stuck in a demeaning job, finally getting a chance to prove himself. SpongeBob, the enthusiastic coworker who believes in Squidward more than Squidward believes in himself. The community of Bikini Bottom coming together. The same community that eats Krabby Patties and creates the economy that keeps the Krusty Krab alive. Band Geeks is the Krusty Krab's moment of transcendence. It is the episode that proves these characters are more than their jobs, more than their routines, more than the trap they are in. And when the Super Bowl did not give that moment the stage it deserved, it felt personal. Not just because Hillenberg had just died, but because the moment itself, the Sweet Victory performance, is about a group of working-class characters briefly escaping the gravity of their ordinary lives to do something extraordinary. And the NFL reduced it to a bumper. Let me stay with the cultural impact for a while, because the Krusty Krab's influence on the real world goes deeper than the Super Bowl and the Wendy's collab. SpongeBob SquarePants became the longest-running American children's animated series in 2025. It has generated over $16 billion in retail sales. It has been translated into more than 30 languages and distributed in more than 170 countries. And through all of that, through the movies and the musicals, and the merchandise and the memes, the Krusty Krab has remained the emotional and narrative center of the franchise. Think about how many SpongeBob memes originate from the Krusty Krab. Is this the Krusty Krab? No, this is Patrick meme from Big Pink Loser. The Squidward looking out the window meme, where he watches SpongeBob and Patrick playing while he is stuck inside the restaurant. The Mr. Krabs confused meme, where he is standing in the Krusty Krab, and everything around him is blurry and spinning. These images have been shared billions of times. They have been used in political commentary, in relationship posts, in existential humor, in therapy memes, and they all come from the Krusty Krab, from a fictional fast food restaurant in a cartoon about a sponge. And I think the reason these moments became memes is because they tap into something universal about the workplace experience. Squidward looking out the window is every employee who has ever glanced at the clock and wished they were somewhere else. Mr. Krabs in the blur is every boss who has lost control of a situation and does not know what to do. Patrick saying no, this is Patrick, is every person who has ever been confused by a simple question because their mind was somewhere else entirely. The Krusty Krab is not just a setting for jokes. It is a mirror. And people keep looking into it and seeing themselves. The thing about SpongeBob that I think a lot of analysis misses is how much of the show's comedy is about labor. Not labor as an abstract concept. Labor as a daily reality. The alarm clock going off. The walk to work. The apron. The register. The first customer. The lunch rush. The cleanup. The walk home. And then doing it again. The show makes this cycle funny and scary and sad and beautiful, sometimes all in the same episode. And the Krusty Krab is where that cycle plays out. I want to talk about one more thing before we start heading toward the end. It is about the Krusty Krab and Imitation Crabs, Season 2, Episode 4B. This is the one where Plankton builds a robot version of Mr. Krabs to try to fool SpongeBob into giving up the secret formula. And the episode is funny, really funny, because SpongeBob has created an elaborate security protocol for verifying Mr. Krabs' identity. There is a secret handshake. It involves standing on one foot, balancing a glass of chocolate milk on your head, and singing the Bikini Bottom national anthem, all of which the robot has to do. And it does. It fools SpongeBob. Temporarily. But the episode is also revealing something about SpongeBob's relationship to authority at the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob does not question the robot, because he wants to believe it is Mr. Krabs. He wants his boss to be there. He wants the structure. He wants someone to tell him to cook. Even when the person giving the orders is not who they say they are. SpongeBob follows them, because the alternative, being without a boss, being without the Krusty Krab hierarchy, is more frightening than being deceived. And how does the episode resolve? The real Mr. Krabs comes back, chasing a penny. SpongeBob accidentally drops the penny into the robot's coin-operated self-destruct slot. The robot explodes, order is restored, and the penny, the thing Mr. Krabs was chasing, is the thing that saves the day. His greed, for once, works in his favor. Even the resolution is a Krusty Krab joke. Money saves the day, not because money is good, but because this is Mr. Krabs' world. And in his world, everything, even heroism, comes down to pocket change. Okay, I know I keep coming back to this point, but I think it is the key to everything. The Krusty Krab is a trap, literally, in its design, a lobster trap, and the characters inside it are trapped. SpongeBob is trapped by his own devotion. Squidward is trapped by his own resignation. Mr. Krabs is trapped by his own greed. Plankton is trapped by his own obsession. And the show lets them all be trapped, together, for over 25 years. No one escapes. No one gets promoted and leaves. No one retires and finds peace. SpongeBob gets the manager job at the end of the movie. And then, the next season, he is back behind the grill. Squidward never becomes an artist. Plankton never gets the formula. Mr. Krabs never has enough money. And I want to say one more thing about the cast before we close out this thread. Carolyn Lawrence, who voices Sandy Cheeks, does not get enough credit for her connection to the Krusty Krab. Sandy is not an employee. She does not work there, but she is one of the few characters who exists completely outside the Krusty Krab's gravitational pull. She is a scientist, an inventor, and Texan squirrel living in an underwater dome. She has ambitions and projects and a life that has nothing to do with the restaurant. And her friendship with SpongeBob exists in a space that is separate from the Krusty Krab. They go jellyfishing, they practice karate, they hang out at her tree dome. Sandy proves that SpongeBob is more than his job. That there is a SpongeBob who exists outside the lobster trap. And I think the show needs Sandy for exactly that reason. Without her, SpongeBob's world would shrink to the size of the Krusty Krab and Squidward's house and his pineapple. Sandy is the horizon line. She is proof that there is a world beyond the grill. And Gary the snail, SpongeBob's pet, the one who waits at home, the one who meows, the one who, in the movie Sponge on the Run, gets kidnapped, sending SpongeBob on an adventure that takes him far from the Krusty Krab. Gary is the emotional anchor that reminds SpongeBob that work is not everything, that there is love and companionship and responsibility outside the restaurant. And when Gary is threatened, SpongeBob drops everything. The grill goes cold. The Krusty Krab goes unstaffed. Because when it really matters, even SpongeBob, the most devoted fry cook in the ocean, has something he cares about more than his job. And that something is a snail who meows at him when he gets home. I bring all of this up because the Krusty Krab is defined as much by what surrounds it as by what is inside it. The pineapple house, the Easter Island head, the rock, the tree dome, the chum bucket. These locations form a constellation around the restaurant, and each one represents a different part of life that the Krusty Krab cannot contain. SpongeBob's home is his comfort. Squidward's house is his ambition. Patrick's rock is his simplicity. Sandy's tree dome is his curiosity. And the chum bucket is his shadow. The Krusty Krab sits at the center of all of it. The gravitational center. The place they all keep returning to. Not because they want to, but because the show's universe is designed so that everything orbits this one point. And that is intentional. Hillenberg set up Bikini Bottom so that the Krusty Krab is, geographically and narratively, the center of the world. You can go on adventures. You can explore the open ocean. You can visit Rock Bottom or Shell City or Atlantis. But you always come back to the trap, to the grill, to the building that looks like a lobster trap, because that is where the show lives. That is where the characters are most fully themselves. That is where the comedy is sharpest, and the emotions are deepest, and the lore is richest. But here is what I have come to believe, and I think this is the real hidden lore of the Krusty Krab. The trap is not the tragedy. The trap is the point, because inside that trap, inside that repetition, inside that eternal return to the same building, the same grill, the same order window, there are moments. Small, specific, irreducible moments of connection. Squidward smashing a pizza in a rude customer's face. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs hiding a body together. SpongeBob pulling Bubble Bass's tongue to reveal the hidden pickles. Squidward secretly eating a Krabby Patty in the dark. Mr. Krabs buying his restaurant back from a corporation because it is more than money to him. These moments do not free the characters from the Krusty Krab. They do not solve anything. They do not change the status quo. But they make the status quo survivable. They make it, dare I say, meaningful. And I think Stephen Hillenberg, who spent his summers as a fry cook in a seafood restaurant before becoming a marine biologist, before becoming an animator, before creating one of the most beloved shows in television history, understood something profound about this. He understood that the place where you work, even if it is a trap, even if it is grinding and repetitive and run by someone who does not value you, can also be the place where you find out who you are. SpongeBob figured out who he was behind that grill. He is the best fry cook in the ocean. He makes people happy. He turns flour and barnacle shavings and turmeric and some mystery ingredient into something that brings an entire community together. And he does it every day, without complaint, without resentment, without any expectation that the world will reward him for it. He just cooks, and the food is good, and the people come, and the Krusty Krab stays open. Let me talk about something that I think ties all of this together in a way I was not expecting when I started researching this video. It has to do with how the show handles time. SpongeBob SquarePants has been on the air since 1999. The characters do not age. The Krusty Krab does not change. Every episode resets to roughly the same starting conditions, and most people would call that a limitation of the format. It is a cartoon. Nothing changes. That is how cartoons work. But I think the Krusty Krab inverts that. The fact that nothing changes is the story. The fact that SpongeBob goes back to the grill every day, that Squidward takes his place behind the register every day, that Mr. Krabs counts his money every day, that Plankton hatches a new scheme every day. That is not a reset. That is a portrait. The show is painting a portrait of what it means to show up, day after day, to the same place, with the same people, doing the same thing, and finding somehow, in that repetition, enough to keep going. I think about the Krusty Krab training video episode and how it ends. The narrator spends the entire episode building to the big reveal, the secret formula, and right as he's about to say it, the episode cuts to black. The credits roll. You never find out. And you are supposed to be frustrated by that. You are supposed to feel cheated. But here is what I have realized on my 6th or 7th rewatch. The episode is not about the formula. It was never about the formula. It is about everything that led up to that moment. The history, the training, the poop acronym, the shot of Mr. Krabs' deep depression, and his slow climb back to something like a life. The formula is just the hook to keep you watching, while the show tells you a story about something else entirely. And that is the Krusty Krab. The secret is not in the formula. The secret is in the building, in the people, in the trap. And here's where I want to bring it all the way back to Stephen Hillenberg. Because I think the Krusty Krab is, ultimately, his most personal creation. More personal than SpongeBob. more personal than Bikini Bottom. The Krusty Krab is the place where Hillenberg's two lives met: the marine biologist and the fry cook, the scientist and the artist, the CalArts graduate who earned an MFA in experimental animation in 1992, and the teenager who spent his summers boiling lobsters in a restaurant kitchen. He took both of those lives, folded them together, and built a building out of them. A lobster trap that looks like a restaurant that looks like a lobster trap. And inside it, he placed characters who embody every complicated, contradictory feeling he ever had about work. The joy of doing something well, the frustration of working for someone who does not appreciate you, the exhaustion of repetition, the pride of craft, the fear of being replaceable, the hope that what you do matters, even if the world tells you it does not. SpongeBob is Hillenberg at the grill, the version of him that loved the job despite everything. Squidward is Hillenberg at the grill, the version that dreamed of something more. Mr. Krabs is every manager Hillenberg ever had, the good and the bad and the complicated. And the Krusty Krab itself is the restaurant, the real one, the one in Maine where a young Stephen Hillenberg cooked and cleaned and learned what it meant to show up every day and do the work. He took that experience and turned it into one of the most successful animated properties in the history of television. Over $16 billion in retail sales, distributed in more than 200 countries, a Broadway musical, 3 feature films, multiple spin-offs, and at the center of all of it, a fast food restaurant at the bottom of the ocean where a sponge makes burgers and a squid hates his life and a crab counts his money and nothing ever changes. There is something beautiful about that, and something sad, because Hillenberg created the Krusty Krab, and then the Krusty Krab outlived him. He died in 2018, and the restaurant kept going. New episodes kept being made. New stories kept being told inside those walls. Characters he created kept showing up to work, and the grill stayed hot, and the patties kept cooking, and the secret formula stayed secret. I think about what it means to create something that outlasts you. Something that keeps functioning after you step away, after you can no longer control it, after you are gone. The Krusty Krab does not need Stephen Hillenberg to exist anymore, just like it does not need Squidward. It just needs someone, anyone. It is a trap, and traps do not care who is inside them. But the thing Hillenberg put inside this trap, the heart of it, the thing that makes people keep coming back to this cartoon restaurant 27 years after its first appearance, that was him. That was his life, his memory, his summers at the grill, his love for the ocean and the tiny overlooked creatures that live in it, his belief that a sponge could be a hero and a burger could be a miracle, and a fast food restaurant could be the most important place in the world if you looked at it with enough love and enough curiosity and enough willingness to sit with the complicated feelings it gives you. I went looking for the hidden lore of the Krusty Krab. And what I found was a love letter from a marine biologist to a lobster trap. That is the real secret formula. It was always love. I know this video has been a long one, and I know I keep spiraling deeper when you might think we have already hit bottom. But that is the thing about the Krusty Krab. There is always another layer, always another episode you forgot about, always another detail in the background of a scene you have watched 100 times. The storyboard artists on the show, people like Aaron Springer, C.H. Greenblatt, Eric Wiese, and Zeus Curvis, they put details into the Krusty Krab that most viewers never catch. Little notes on the menu board, background gags in the kitchen, the way the cash register drawer sticks sometimes, the specific shade of brown on the wood paneling that shifts between seasons as the animation style evolved. These are people who loved this building as much as the characters, and they treated every frame that took place inside it as an opportunity to add something new. And the background music. The Krusty Krab has its own musical identity. That steel guitar, those ukulele riffs, the Hawaiian-inspired soundtrack that Hillenberg chose specifically because of his love for Hawaiian and surf culture. He lived in Hawaii for a time and absorbed the music, and it became the sonic signature of Bikini Bottom. When you hear that music, you are in the Krusty Krab. You are sitting at a steering wheel table. You are smelling something frying. You are home. And I think that musical identity is one of the most underrated elements of the show's success. The sound of the Krusty Krab is as recognizable as the look of it. It is comfort food for your ears. The Krusty Krab has seen every kind of story this show can tell. It has been a horror movie set, a labor satire, a love story, a buddy comedy, a corporate parable, a war zone, and a meditation on the meaning of work. It has held SpongeBob's greatest triumphs and his worst failures. It has broken Squidward's spirit and, on rare occasions, restored it. It has fed Plankton's obsession and exposed Krabs' soul. And it has done all of this without ever stopping being a cartoon restaurant where a talking sponge makes burgers. That is the beauty of it. The Krusty Krab never pretends to be anything more than what it is. A fast food restaurant at the bottom of the ocean, shaped like a lobster trap, with a secret recipe nobody knows, and a sign shaped like a clam. It is silly. It is absurd. It is a setting for a kids' show that started 27 years ago and just kept going. But if you look closer, if you pay attention the way I have been paying attention tonight, rewatching these episodes, reading about Hillenberg's background, tracing the contradictions in the lore, following the threads of labor exploitation and corporate satire and broken friendships and quiet moments of grace. If you look at all of that, you see something that I think Steven Hillenberg understood from the very beginning. The best stories are not about extraordinary places. They are about ordinary ones. The places we go every day. The places we complain about. The places we love without quite knowing why. The places that trap us. And maybe the places that hold us. The Krusty Krab is a lobster trap at the bottom of the ocean, and there is a sponge inside it who wakes up every morning overjoyed to be there, and a squid who wakes up every morning wishing he was anywhere else, and a crab who built the trap in the first place, out of a broken retirement home, at the lowest point of his life, because he needed something to hold on to, and a Plankton, across the street, watching through the window, remembering when it was supposed to be theirs. There is a building at the bottom of the ocean. It looks like a lobster trap. You have seen it 1,000 times. And I hope after tonight, you see it differently. And if you are still awake, thank you. Genuinely. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. For going this deep into something that most people would call just a cartoon restaurant. It is just a cartoon restaurant. But it is also, I think, one of the most thoughtfully constructed fictional places in the history of television. And if you cannot sleep, well, that is what the next video is for. If you enjoyed this, a subscribe really does go a long way. It helps us keep doing exactly this. Sitting here at 2 in the morning, pulling apart the hidden lore of shows that shaped who we are. And there is a lot more to pull apart. So I will see you next time. Good night.